Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 37 with Brielle Hayward-Piatkovskyi. She is an old friend of mine from my undergrad days at the University of Delaware, so it was really great to reconnect with her recently and then jump on for this podcast here. So she's doing really interesting stuff with her Ph.D. studies and is just a proper geek. I've always appreciated that about her, and so we just talk about what she's into, the work that she's doing, and all that good stuff. So strap in for a awesome episode. And after this brief message from our sponsor, this is episode number 37 with Brielle. This episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast is brought to you by Top Hat, the teaching app that makes active learning come to life. Top Hat already helps thousands of college professors create their perfect course, both inside and outside the classroom. It's a suite of easy-to-use apps to engage your class, adopt incredible next-generation textbooks, or to run tests within a secure digital environment. Best of all, it integrates with all of the popular LMS systems and doesn't require IT approval to get started. See why professors in over 700 colleges and universities across North America already use Top Hat to power their classrooms. Visit tophat.com/higheredgeek to learn more. That's tophat.com/higheredgeek. Yeah, we will go ahead and dive in here. Appreciate you spending some time chatting with me here for the podcast, Brielle. And this is sort of we crossed paths, I guess, again after a couple of years. We have a University of Delaware connection where I went to undergrad and where you're currently pursuing your doctorate. So I'll be curious to hear kind of more about your journey and things that you've learned and the things that you geek out about. But we'll start off as we always do. If you just want to share an introduction of who you are and your professional journey, how you got to be where you are today, then we'll kind of dig in a couple of pieces of your journey.
Sure. Thank you for having me as well.
Yeah, my pleasure.
My name's Brielle, as you've already introduced me, and I'm from Delaware, actually, and did my bachelor's degree in the University of Delaware in biology. I took a year off, wasn't sure really what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to go to school, but not exactly what for. And so I decided to go to a state school in Connecticut, kind of by happenstance. It just so happened that there was somebody there doing research that I was very interested in, and so I picked that over a bigger name school to do my master's degree. Uh-huh. So I worked with Sarah Crawford, and I did some cancer research, and specifically looking at the environment in which cancer grows and trying to understand how that affects the way cancer grows. Because this is a kind of up-and-coming area of cancer research, and it's kind of important. Uh-huh. And while there, I had a training experience to work for Martin Schwartz at Yale University for 2 years, and I did some cardiovascular research. So I got a good idea of what working in academia felt like, and after that, and after finishing a master's degree, I decided I wanted to stay in academia because I really enjoyed how that atmosphere, how it works, and the kinds of interactions you get. So I get to work with people who are starting out in their scientific career and academic careers, as well as with people who've been there for a very long time. And it's just, you really grow in that kind of an experience. And so I decided to do my PhD, and University of Delaware has a great program and a lot of really interesting research going on. So I decided to come a little closer to home.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I guess maybe now, since you've had very distinct, different experiences, we go to talk about people's sort of undergraduate experience, what that kind of gave to them personally and professionally. But I guess if you can think of anything from kind of each part of your journey so far, like what did your undergraduate experience at UD give you? What did, this kind of, like you said, kind of by happenstance, you went somewhere different, but I'm sure you learned some stuff and all that. So like, what did those different parts of your journey give you as you're, pursuing, it's going to be like a long kind of process for you. Like it seems like it kind of cemented that a little bit more for you. So I guess what were those kind of morsels that the different experiences you've had so far, like what do those give you?
Yeah. So, undergraduate really just is kind of, in biology, gives you a very broad look at what biology is. So it really hits on everything from as small as like what happens in the cell up through how like populations change globally. So like undergrad, it was just kind of like, well, what do I want to do with biology? Like, where do I want to go in this? But there are a lot of really great people in my program, a lot of great professors, and my capstone class for my program, I happened to take a cancer biology class, and two of my closest friends in the program were in the class with me, and we were all very engaged. We got to write a mock grant, which really showed me what trying to succeed in this field takes. And it was really fun to kind of come up with a project and write a grant about it just based on looking at the literature. Uh-huh. And to do it with friends, because of course that takes the edge off of a very scary project like writing a 10-page grant.
Sure.
But and of course you and I were friends, so that was also a plus. It's great to have friends that are not in your program to help lighten things up and kind of give you a perspective in a different direction. And so I really just had to do some soul searching, and cancer was something that it just seemed to click. And then in my master's program, so it was a small state school. University of Delaware is a state school, but it's quite large. I wanted to go somewhere smaller. I wanted to feel like I was part of like a small pond, so to speak. And Southern was definitely a small pond. But I really was given a lot of freedom to kind of do what I wanted. Working in my field, there's a lot of variety. In some work environments, things are very structured. You're basically like really guided through your projects. Whereas other places like where I went, it was very open, and I could kind of just play around and, do messy science, so to speak. So that was also great. And for me, the people I work with, which are also in academia, also going through things like taking classes while also trying to perform research and going through the troubleshooting that research really takes. There's a lot of ways to find out how not to do something. Uh-huh. And it's great to have a network of people that are there that kind of guide you through. So a lot of it is the people I get to work with has helped kind of help me with making this decision, as well as, I've always enjoyed classes. I really do love doing the research. So it's almost like trying to put a puzzle together. And when you find the pieces that fit, it's just a wonderful feeling. Mm-hmm. And while it can be frustrating when the pieces don't fit, you still get some questions that you can kind of pull from it. And you start to see the bigger picture from the things that don't and do fit, so to speak.
Yeah.
There's a combination of those things that, I might have had a more winding path than most people. A lot of people go straight into the Ph.D. from their bachelor's, but in a lot of ways, it's really made me appreciate what research has to offer and has given me better focus.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. And just you saw something different, and you did that, and you appreciated, what made it unique, and then, you made the decision to come back to an environment that was familiar, but obviously doing something very different than what you were doing before here. So you're seeing different, aspects of the institution, different light and stuff. And I think, it's kind of good on you for, just taking that tangent. And I think exactly what you're saying too, of just if you do something and you didn't have the result that you wanted from it, it's still just that curiosity of well, why? Why did it end up that way? And you just sort of obviously in the literal experiments that you're doing, testing a hypothesis or something, but also just it could have been obviously that different way where it's you go to Southern Connecticut and just be oh, this is awful, I don't like it. But you start to realize what is it about it that I don't like, and what is it that I do prefer? But if you're always in the same environment or doing the same things, you might not understand or have kind of the self-awareness of oh, I do like being at a bigger school. I like being in Delaware. I like, you have a little bit more of well, because it's, kind of compared to that other thing, versus you just have nothing to compare it to. So it's just this is fine and I don't mind it, but I just don't know what else is out there. So I guess all of that kind of stuff is what sort of stuck out to me. So it's cool. Kind of that was the stuff that's coming to mind for you now, sort of, when you reflect back on the experience and everything. So obviously all of that bringing you to where you are now, what is it, if you just want to dig in a little bit deeper with the current work and research and everything that you're doing now, or the classes and stuff that you're taking, what do you enjoy most about what you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really love what I'm doing right now. And even though I'm still in the biology department, all of these kind of places I've been have always been in biology, like straight biology. But the things that I've done in my research in these places has really hit on a lot of other disciplines. So I had a fellowship in my master's program that focused on chemistry. My master's thesis was focused on like the environment that the cells grow in. So that's touching a little more on engineering. I worked in a mechanotransduction lab, so that gets into biophysics. So I've actually ended up in a biomedical engineering lab, even though I'm in the biology department. And even though I'm doing a lot of pure biology, I'm working alongside a lot of engineers who are doing some really cool things that could help my own research, and I can get a grasp on how they do these things so that in my future I could maybe use some of these tools and approaches that they use. But it's a really interdisciplinary group. So there's a lot of us that come from various backgrounds. We've got a chemist, some chemical engineers, mechanical engineer, I'm the biologist. A lot of the biomedical engineers have like various different backgrounds in everything ranging from like very biology to like instrument design. And I'm doing a lot of cardiovascular research. It's not really cancer, but it's still somewhat related, and it's something very near and dear to my heart. And our lab is a developmental lab, so we are trying to address diseases that affect babies, essentially, in one way or another. So one of the big things that we're focused on is bronchopulmonary dysplasia, which is referred to as BPD, and it's a disease that affects prematurely born infants. So an infant that's born greater than 10 weeks early needs to be ventilated, and being ventilated can cause lung damage, which can require that that infant remain on a ventilator. And if that happens over a certain amount of days, that baby will be diagnosed with BPD, and that can be a lifelong disease with issues with breathing. And so we are very interested in trying to understand what this disease is and how this disease works, so that we can focus on how do we prevent this disease from happening to infants. Yeah. So that's part of what I work on. I'm working on the cardiovascular side of that, because this damage causes damage to the cardiovascular system, which is very crucial in the lung to allow for that gas exchange to occur so that, you can survive. Yeah. So we have other people who are working on more of like the lung and the organ itself, and I work more on the cell side with the cardiovascular system.
Right. Well, I guess that's just like, because I know some research might just be more theoretical. Like this seems like a very like practically driven, like you're trying to find a solution for a very specific problem. Is that something that kind of like you're saying, like it kind of like resonates with you personally in terms of just having that very like that kind of focus versus maybe just doing something where you're like, I guess maybe not as, as driven towards a solution. I mean, it's a little bit of, a world that's foreign to me, but I guess I know sometimes people might not be, working as kind of directly towards specific goals. It seems like you might be, or, and maybe I'm wrong, but I guess is that sort of like that focus sort of, part of the draw for you in terms of like what you kind of, keeps you driven, keeps you at it day after day?
Yeah, so biology is a really crazy field in this way, because you can get everything ranging from discovering something for the sake of discovering something to, trying to cure diseases. And even though our focus is on BPD, I am a little more on that basic side of trying to understand like how this works. But what definitely drives me is knowing that figuring out how these pieces fit together could save lives. Like that's maybe why I got into cancer research initially. Cardiovascular disease is the number one disease that can kill you. It's even worse than cancer. So, it's still in that realm, but I guess connecting it to a bigger picture is something that's always resonated with me as well. Like, why do I do this research? Like, this will hopefully help save people from suffering in some way. So that is definitely a focus for me. Definitely something I am deeply interested in. And I actually forgot to mention the most important part of my own project. BPD is really important, but the bigger kind of question that comes out of BPD is that it has a sex component to it. Males are way more likely to develop BPD than females. And this is well known clinically, but at the research level, this hasn't been something that has ever really been addressed. Almost all research on BPD was just no one specifies what the sex of the material they're working with is. But there seems to be something about male versus female infants that really affect the likelihood of developing BPD. And actually, BPD carries a mortality rate. About 50% of those who get diagnosed with it actually die. So a lot of male babies are dying from BPD compared to females. So I'm also trying to tease out what makes the male and female cells different and how this relates to BPD. So that's more of the basic side, looking at male versus female. But the bigger overarching theme is that I'm trying to help provide what these differences are so that we can start to translate this into how do we better the odds for males and hopefully better the odds for all babies. But let's start with the most affected group.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and I guess, it seems like, you're, and imagine you'd have to be news to a certain extent. And I guess one thing, the one point that came to my mind, that driver, which I appreciate, of just trying to reduce suffering and, just do right by people, give something that is beneficial to the work that you're doing. Because some people, I'm sure it might be maybe it's more of the people working pharmaceutical sales or something, but if you're researching a thing, it's oh, cool, this could probably make a lot of money, and this drug that will sell or whatever. It's just you're in it, and I feel like you're doing it for all the right reasons, which is awesome. But I guess what I was going to say, I feel it sounds like you're a curious person. I would imagine you would have to be just always curious and wondering why, and trying to find those answers. And I think that's a properly geeky trait. You're just somebody who kind of loves learning and exploring and kind of absorbing information. So, whether it is stuff that you kind of do professionally on the side, just as other involvements to develop yourself or, help others, or just the stuff, kind of an or situation, just the things that you do for fun when you can. What are you geeking out about currently? And I don't know if it's stuff that you've always been into or stuff that you've discovered more recently, just anything that you'd want to highlight.
Yeah, sure. So I play a lot of games, and that ranges from video up through table games. Mm-hmm. And in fact, this is a common trait in, I think, researchers. So our part of the department that I work in, the biomedical engineers, we try to at least once a month all get together on a Friday night, eat lots of junk food, and sit around and play various table games and board games. So our current favorite is Betrayal at the House on the Hill, which is great. It's like a mansion building game that you're kind of exploring, and then there are 100 different possible endings. You can trip specific endings when you get into a certain room and find a certain card. And then somebody becomes a traitor usually and turns against the rest of you, and you have to meet certain goals to get to the end. So that's a fun time. Well, I also play video games, so that's a great way to come home and just relax and really get into it. So I'm pretty into Witcher right now. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I feel like I got to explore that one. Yeah, I hear a lot of good things about it.
It's really good. You have to really push through, because it's not quite like other games, and the first couple levels of you leveling up can be a little rough. You'll probably die a lot.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know.
Yeah. And then I also play Dungeons and Dragons, which is something I've discovered recently and is pretty geeky, but is very creative and a great way to just kind of relax and just let loose with the creativity. So that's been a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, and I know we had a guest a couple episodes who recently discovered D&D, and Yeah, I mean, I played it back in the day with my brother and some of his friends and stuff, and it just is like I've garnered appreciation for it. I think it, it gets a bad rap is probably, one of the dorkier things you can do, but yeah,
Yeah.
like it just, yeah, you get like, because I likened it to almost like you're doing improv or something. Like it's very like articulated, structured improv. Because like if you're doing it right, you're gonna be like, okay, what would my character do? Like what would they say?
Yeah.
And you're like totally getting out of your own head and just like doing that. And you can do it if it's like fantasy or sci-fi or like a lot of the kind of popular universes have their own like role playing game version or whatever. So it could even be like, oh, I really love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I want to play a role playing game in that, or like, or just kind of like straight Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, that's awesome, and I think you've got kind of all your kind of your street cred there, because I think like I've been trying to really get into gaming more. Like I've done that all my life, and I've always I guess still always like keep tabs on it, just kind of knowing like, oh, that game looks cool, or I'm kind of seeing what people are talking about and whatever, and like I feel like I'm like so behind now, where people be like, oh, do you play this?
Yeah.
You play that? And I'm like, all my cred is gone, man. I'm like, I was just like giving myself a break, because it's like I got a lot of other stuff I got to do. So like I'm doing my best here. But yeah, I mean, board games, I think that, because I know I was just talking to somebody about this too, just like missing doing like couch co-op or like, playing against my brother, like right next to me kind of thing. And I think board games are kind of supplementing that, where it's like, okay, yeah, we can like hang out together in person and, do something fun, because anymore I'm either just like playing online or playing solo in a game. So, yeah, it's cool.
I guess
that stuff. Yeah.
since you brought it up, I should mention that my husband, a friend of ours, and myself, we do play Diablo together. So it's almost like the old LAN parties, except for it's on a console. But that's great, where we just get together and we just start running through dungeons together and destroying everything, of course. But yeah, no, it's a lot of fun and a good way for me to just kind of let loose and be social. I don't do it often enough, but I do try to fit it in here and there. Helps refresh the mind, focus on something else for a little bit.
Yeah, I need to. I was just talking to my brother about Diablo, so I feel like that's going to be one of my next purchases. But, well, I guess, yeah, well, put that out into the universe. Like people keep me honest, so have to follow up on how I enjoy it. But, well, yeah, I guess you mentioned like that kind of intentionality. I mean, just fitting it into your life, or like making sure that you're getting together for those like monthly board game parties and stuff like that, like game nights and stuff. So, putting that energy out there, like how is that, obviously it's just the relaxation, but anything else maybe in terms of like your hobbies and things that you've done, like how have those positively contributed to your life, to, if you want to kind of dig deeper into that, of any sort of anecdote or just sort of like, like life advice or tip that you've kind of garnered from, maybe doing something very unique like D&D, or just making the intentional effort to make sure you're making room for the things that bring joy into your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me personally, I think most of us can agree that when you focus on one thing for too long, you really get fatigued. And you can start going in a circle in your thoughts. And especially, it's like my job has a lot of times where things are not working. And when you just keep doing something and it's not working and it's not working, you get really discouraged. And this happens to anyone who's doing research. It's very common. And part of why we have these game nights is the idea is that we can just relax, be with each other for a few hours, socialize. It helps us also like bond. So everyone that's various labs who come to these events, so it's not just my lab, and we're all pretty close knit at this particular facility. So like anytime we're having a problem, we can go to anyone who's there, and we feel close enough that we can like talk about what's wrong with our research. We're all doing extremely different kinds of research. Everyone's working in different parts of the body, so it's not even like we have a tissue that's similar between us. And yet like we're all very close knit and we're all aware of what everyone else is doing. And I just find that like when I come home after my brain is like exhausted itself, even just watching Netflix for an hour can kind of help reset that. And by, the end of watching some episode, like my brain has already like refreshed itself. And I think that's really important, and something that especially undergrads. I know I didn't appreciate this as an undergrad personally, and most of the undergrads I know now definitely don't appreciate this. But you definitely need to reset your brain. You definitely need to give it a break. Let it focus on something else, because in the back of your head, you're going to process all those things that you were trying to process and you're struggling to get through. It'll happen. You just gotta put it on the back burner to let your brain work it out while you just take a break. That is the biggest piece of advice I could give anyone who's really going at it in their studies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because I think that those are there's just so much value in like the hobbies that we do, the side project, and having that awareness of how valuable they are, so that you're making sure to make time for them. And like, I think, those like two pieces of what you said of just like, sometimes like, I'm sure it's just like venting about like this frustrating thing that was going on, but other times it could just be that like second pair of eyes. You're like, oh, I'm really struggling, to do this. And somebody could be like, well, have you ever tried doing it this way? Or, oh, I encountered something like that and this is what worked for me. Or even just like what you're saying, you kind of just like check your brain at the door, plop down and watch a show or something. And it could be, because again, I feel like, I don't know if you'll recommend anything in particular that you do, but like, or like, like that you watch, but like, because I feel like so many like high operating, like high achieving people watch like the trashiest reality television because they just really need to like check their brain. But it's like doing that, and like sometimes even if it's like just being bored or just being quiet, like, cause I'll just like drive with the radio off and just like, I'm, basically on autopilot because I've driven it, a million times. So I know, where I'm going, kind of thing. It's like you can, allow that room to like slow down, allow for inspiration and that idea to come through just kind of slowing down and, sometimes even just like tuning out. Because, I think there's that societal pressure to always be just like, well, what's next? Like, what am I doing? That's like that. It's hard to just turn that off and quiet and just be still. But it has a lot of value just in terms of reducing your stress. But you could find that solution, like you're saying, like processing all that stuff that was like getting inputted in throughout the day. Now your brain can kind of sort it out, connect it, and provide some clarity. So, I'm really glad that has been your experience, and you're appreciative of that kind of like kind of being able to manage your energy and have that space and everything. So,
absolutely.
But well, so I guess, is there anything in particular? You've mentioned a couple of things that we'll definitely include in the show notes, like the games that you play and all that kind of stuff. Anything that you're reading, watching, and or listening to that you'd like to recommend so we can include in the show notes?
Well, you brought it up. So I really love trashy sci-fi.
All right, yeah.
The worse, the better almost. And I can't really think of any specific examples right now. But it's definitely one of those when Netflix used to have like ratings instead of how close it matches you. If it was a sci-fi show that had 1 star, that's what I would pick.
Right. So is it like stuff like on par with like Sharknado, just really like kitschy or kind of like poor, like the CGI is like low quality, but it's just sort of like funny, like that kind of stuff? Like, is that sort of like
it's
what it
more
is?
like outlandish.
Okay.
Right. So Z Nation, which is more fantasy than sci-fi, was poking fun at like the zombie craze.
Okay.
But the first season, so Z Nation later seasons doesn't fall into this as much because they understand that it's bad. I like it when they don't know they're doing a bad job.
Right.
But their first season was so bad, and it looked like they were trying so hard, but it was just so bad. It was quite entertaining.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It was like the overacting.
Right. Yeah.
And the like really bad puns, and then like trying to be like really serious but kind of joking and over the top about the zombies, which zombies in and of themselves are just great. Really just bad science, but great. I mean, most of them are pretty bad science, but still love it. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. I guess it's good. Yeah. You imagine sometimes like, in any capacity, like, if you're cursed with too much knowledge and you can never enjoy stuff anymore because you're just like, you're completely wrong, about history or about like how politics works or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good that you can still enjoy like bad science because like, yeah, there's so many like tropes or cliches that are just like always, go-tos for stuff like that. But yeah, it's just like, yeah, the self-importance and like, the earnest, where they're just like this is like good. We're gonna try and like really, commit to it and stuff. And like, yeah, sometimes it does like lose a little bit of the appeal if it's like oh, it's bad and we know we're bad and we're like leaning into it or like winking at the camera. If it's just like, no, like you're really thinking you're making like a masterpiece and you're kind of missing the mark. So no, that's great.
They never run out of bullets.
Okay, one of the,
yeah. that's like my favorite part. They don't conserve them and they always have them.
Mm-hmm. Right, which it's like there's no like conflict or like there's no like, oh, they're like surviving. It's like, yeah, this is essentially an 80s action movie. Like they just unlimited ammo and like which those are also good, like trashy, like any like Schwarzenegger movie from the 80s, like it's brilliant. Well, I guess, yeah, anything else that you might want to recommend? I don't know if you're like, if there's like a Spotify playlist that you love or a podcast or anything else you might be reading that you'd want to recommend.
Yeah, so unfortunately I'm not reading anything. Most of the reading I do is like papers, and I don't want to read anymore. So I can recommend great journal articles, but that's not going to help anyone unless you want to go to sleep. I do listen to a lot of music though, and I pretty much listen to Pandora exclusively. And I've been really into like the music from Black Panther and by the artist Khaled. There's just something about the way that he puts his music together. It's got really interesting sounds that go along with the lyrics and just a really good sound. So like when I'm working in the lab, it's calming while also being like interesting. So my brain can focus on that a little bit. And like I can get really zoned into what I'm doing in the lab. So yeah, stuff by him, and I guess Nikki Heeden is another one of my favorites. She's also got like a almost like bluesy feel, but modernized. Yeah, and then the Black Panther soundtrack is amazing. Yes, so that is definitely something I'm listening to.
Heavy rotation. And I guess because I think I've now been using Spotify in that similar way of what like, when Pandora kind of came on the scene of just sort of like, because Spotify has like the Discover Weekly, they'll kind of like curate different kind of music for you and stuff. So it's like, yeah, if you're just like, yeah, I really like this, and it'll give you stuff that's like that. And, if you're like, yes, no, yes, but then if it's like you have a go-to as well, you can just, listen to that. But cool. Well, yeah, we will wrap up the episode here as we always do. If you want to just highlight something or things that you are looking forward to in your job, life, and or the world.
Oh, sure. So I'm looking forward to the current aspect of my project I'm working on. So I'm doing a lot of kind of like, I guess the term would be genome to phenome. So looking at how like the genetic makeup of us, so I'm working with human samples, that our genetic makeup and how things are expressed, how it affects the behavior of the cells. So that's really cool. There are sex differences there. So like males and females have different expression of genes, which makes sense. And that translates to different behaviors. And this is at the cellular level, which is something that might be surprising to some people. But even our cells have slight differences due to whether or not they have an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. I should say extra X chromosome or a Y chromosome. So I don't know, I think that's pretty cool, cutting edge. Not a lot of people are super focused on how sex may contribute to various diseases or how it may be different in males versus females. So this is something that's up and coming and I think is really cool and interesting and something people should really start thinking about.
Wow. Yeah, I guess it does sound like you are onto something there. And because I think that, there's so many aspects of like health that if you're contouring it more to the individual, I'm sure it's just going to be that much more beneficial versus like just trying to kind of throw the same sort of strategies. It's just like, oh, this is just generally, when we just sort of throw at this sort of problem or anything like that. It's I'm sure there's a lot more nuances to it than that vary by sex or by just kind of culture background. Like there's so many different like factors and stuff. So it's cool that you're kind of digging into that one aspect that, like you said, a lot of different applications that could just be very beneficial to helping reduce suffering and all of that good stuff. So it's definitely something to look forward to, your commitment to that work. And I appreciate the work that you're doing and all that you've shared about all that good stuff. And I'm glad that you're kind of back in the general neighborhood. Look forward to trying to hang out again here soon. And just best of luck, continuing with your projects there. And just really appreciate your time. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me and listening to me geek out.
Anytime. This podcast is a proud member of the Connect EDU podcast network, bringing together diverse voices and thoughtful discussions to the higher ed community. Check us out online at connectedu.network or on Twitter at connectedupod. Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast.